Good morning, everyone. My name is Ing Sing, and I'm your moderator today. Welcome to our workshop. Today, we're going to explore more in UX, user experience, which it should not be a new thing for all of us today. As a designer, developer, business owner, or stakeholder, we always can decide the application that we're going to develop, the product we're going to build. We always can decide the features. In another word, we can dictate or decide what our product can do. But however, how do we ensure is our target clients or user will do or not? Or will they do according to our plan? What our product can do is definitely not the same as what our user will do. How do we create a product that is easy to understand, easy to use, and hard to forget? That's why today we have invited two speakers from HFI, Mr. Masuk and also Miss Vanita, where both of them will share with you a lot of their experience and also some key features that you can take away from them and ensure the product that you're going to develop is user experience friendly user. Okay, Mr. Masuk is a senior user experience with intensive of experience of over 20 years in enabling UX practice in organization, UX strategy, research, and design. And Ms. Vanita has 20 years experience leading and implementing CX innovation solution, working with global corporation and stakeholder. So without further ado, I would like to invite both of them. Mr. Masud, are you there?
Yes. Hi,
Okay,
Ing Seng.
so I pass over
Yeah,
to you.
sure. Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yeah. Okay. So good morning, everyone. Today, I'm going to talk to you a bit about the history of user experience, what is important from a user experience perspective, and for knowing that, we have to understand how this field began. So if you look at the 80s, right? If you look at the 80s, uh, companies just had to get the hardware right. And I remember when I was in school, one of my uncles had come from the US and he had carried a laptop, a machine, a computer, which was the size of a suitcase, a trolley suitcase that you lug around. At that point of time in the 80s, you just had to get the hardware right and you were successful. At that time, we had these mainframes and systems that occupied the size of one room. You know, the memory in laptops today is much more than what you had in a mainframe. And it was all about just getting the hardware right. From there, we moved on to 90s, where you just had to get the software working. And this is one of the reasons why you still interact with softwares that are very poorly designed. Everybody has, if anybody has gone through enterprise systems like SAP for HR, payroll, or even onboarding systems, then you understand the kind of torture that you go through when you're going through these systems. And that was because at that time we did not have an understanding of user experience. We did not have good computing power, and it was all about just getting the software right. If your software worked, that's it, you were very successful. Cut to now, to the present day, where everyone, every organization in the company is focusing on user-centered design solution, and especially with the advent of the internet. If your customer does not like what you're offering, they with one click they can go on to the next next website, next e-commerce store. That's one of the reasons why user-centered design is one of the key differentiators. Yeah, earlier you were stuck with software, you were stuck with hardware. Now our users have a lot of choice in terms of selecting the services that they want to go, and they with one click they can move on and go to your competitor in just a matter of few seconds. Yeah. Apart from that, now we are moving on to from user centered design solutions, we are moving on to persuasion, we are moving on to personalization, we are moving on to a different level of expertise. We'll be touching a bit upon that, but the focus here is mainly on the usability side of user experience. Now, if I have to give you an analogy, yeah, this is a Colombian obstruction device. This was an experiment run by scientists in the early 70s and 80s. And what this is a glass cage, yeah, where you have a cheese at the end of the glass cage. You have a mouse, yeah, who is egged on to go and get the cheese. But there's an electric grid right in the center of the glass cage. Now, what happens is, interestingly, what they noticed was that if the shock increases, if you increase the shock, there's a less chance that the mouse will go and get the cheese. But once you start reducing the shock, then there's a greater chance that the mouse will go and actually get the piece of cheese. So think about your website or your products like that. And the cheese, the electric grid here, the shock that you get, your customers get, is more about the friction that they face in, while experiencing your site. We all love to hate captures. We all have gone through horrible experiences where we're going through something on the mobile and suddenly a big pop-up window comes up and covers the entire screen. And then you're frantically trying to close the window, but it doesn't close because, the brilliant, developers, product managers, other designers felt that this was a good way to trap the user. Let's, try to sell them something. If they find it difficult to leave, they will definitely consume our information more. So, in that sense, it's all about user experience is all about reducing the friction. Yeah, you reduce the friction, people will come to your site, people will, go and get the cheese, which is the goal or the service that you're trying to sell. Yeah. Now, when we talk about user experience, it's basically divided into, two sections. One is on the left side, we talk about usability, which is one of the basic table stakes. So usability is all about whether your user can browse, whether your user will understand how to search, how to consume information, whether they understand the information and whether they can interact easily with your website. That's all about the friction that we just discussed, right, in the previous slide. So it's all about the performance. And, if they understand this, your website is sorted to a certain extent. But the most important thing here to realize is now usability is becoming table stakes. Yeah, almost every company in the world has invested a lot in usability, though there are many companies that are still lacking. Yeah, but this is something that is basic table stakes. Now, if you talk about adoption, why would people adopt, your system? Just because they can do stuff? Will they actually engage with your system? Will they return? Will they convert? Will they persuade? This is a different ballgame altogether. Now, these two fields within user experience, on the left side, usability and motivation, is based on two fields of psychology. On the left side, it's all about cognition, about understanding the human physiology, understanding how we see, how we think, how we interact, and how we remember things. On the right side is the motivation part is based on our understanding of behavioral psychology. What what prompts people to act, what motivates people to act, what is it that will engage them, will get them to interact with your site, to buy your product, and the two of them combined together is what we call user experience. Yeah. Now, from a usability perspective, which is what we are going to focus on, we have four different kinds of loads that your user will have when they interact with your system. Yeah, so we call them the visual, intellect, memory, and motor. Yeah. Now, our understanding of how we function is very different from how we actually function. Yeah, you would think that vision is just like a camera. You see things and there's a continuous picture being updated. I'm looking outside my window. There's lovely greenery there. I'm looking at pots. I'm looking at a bird flying there. Yeah, it's it doesn't happen that way. What we are actually seeing is we are seeing a combination of fixations and saccades. So fixation means I am seeing bits and pieces of information. I have saccadic movement, which is, when a user blinks rapidly. And then what happens is that the brain stitches all this information together. That's why when you look at websites, sometimes you see that when things are right in front of you, you'll realize that you have not noticed that at all. You would probably have missed that. And there's a very interesting concept about inattentional blindness, which is again a limiting of our vision. In fact, there was this very interesting experiment that was done a couple of years back by two researchers, and they had two groups. They had two groups on a basket outside a basketball court, and there was a basketball game going on. Yeah. So one group was not given instructions. They were just asked to observe the basketball players. The other group, the second group, they were asked to count the number of times the basketball players actually passed the ball to each other. Yeah, they were actually asked to count the number of passes. Now, this led to very interesting results at the end of this experiment. After some time, the researchers had a lady in a gorilla suit. Yeah, actually walk across the court and walk past the basketball players. Yeah. And this was done in the middle of the game. And then after the experiment ended, the researchers asked these two groups what did they notice and what did they notice on the screen. What did they notice on the screens? Did they notice anything unusual? Yeah. Interestingly, and what was seen was that almost everyone in the first group, yeah, was able to, they said that we saw basketball players, we saw, somebody in a gorilla suit walking across the court. The other group that was asked to count the number of passes that the basketball players make, they almost 70% of them did not notice that lady across the court, go across the court. And that's because, again, how we function, right? It's not that if you put everything, people will look. There is something called inattentional blindness. This is the way human beings function. In fact, our intellect is not how, it's not how we think it is. Our memory is not how we think it is. In fact, you should try this experiment when you go back home today and call up your friend or talk to a friend of yours, a childhood friend, and try to recollect a memory that you had from your childhood, or you can talk to your parents. Yeah. Interestingly, they would have some variation in how you would recollect, those incidents from your childhood. And it's not because, we are forgetful or we are lying. It's because our interpretation, our memory is not very reliable. Yeah, it's again, because we have these limitations in our physiology, we have to understand this, and then only we can create something that is usable, that can be easily consumed by users. In fact, I'll ask you a question now. How many of you are frustrated when you have to enter an IFSC code or enter a bank account number that have 5 or 6 zeros? Yeah, just raise your hand. I will just check in the Q&A section. Yeah, well, this is one of my pet peeves. Yeah, whenever I'm trying to enter, numbers that are consecutive, that where there is no grouping, I find it very difficult to track it. And again, that's because of a limitation of our working memory. The way our brain is designed is, if I can give you an analogy, it's like that of a computer. So you have three different types of memories. You have your sensory memory, you have your short-term and working memory, and you have your long-term memory. Now, if you look at sensory memory, now you're looking at me, you're hearing me, talk about usability. That is the sensory part. That is like the display of your computer. That sensory memory is very limited. You can remember it's very high resolution. You can clearly interpret what's going on, but you will not retain that information. From there, it goes on to your RAM, which is your short-term memory. Now, your working memory is what you need to process this information. And the reasons why we are distracted is, probably because we are overloading our working memory. Our short-term memory is very limited. And from there, if we move off, if we have to retain information to our long-term memory, to our hard disk, we have to repeat, we have to do many things that places all this content into individual neurons that are there in our brain that are retained. Unless we repeat this information, unless we use mnemonics, unless we use different channels to encode this information, we will not retain this information. Hence, one of the biggest things in usability that we have to do is ensure that our short-term memory, our user's short-term memory, is not unnecessarily loaded. Yeah. From there, we move on to the very interesting, very fascinating, and very complicated part of UX, which is how do you motivate the customer? And it's all about, persuasion, emotion, and trust. A user will only interact with your website or your product if they trust your website or your service offering. It actually starts with trust. From there, you have to arouse an emotion. You have to arouse an emotion because almost all users, right? Any human being who is making a decision, most of our decisions are driven through emotion. Yeah, it's not logic. We like to think that we are very logical human beings, but most of our decisions are driven by emotions, and then we try to rationally justify it. And after the emotion is aroused, then you can start using methods, persuasion methods, where you can guide users, where you can get users to persuade them, to tell them why our products are valuable for you, why this is something that will motivate you, that will persuade you to do the stuff. It actually starts with trust, then emotion, and P, but TEP doesn't sound very catchy. Hence, we've called this as PET, which is persuasion, emotion, and trust. Yeah. In terms of user experience, like we all know that it's become a huge differentiator. In fact, companies worldwide have we've seen that most companies who invest in user experience, yeah, their share market price is up, their revenues are up, and customers are more loyal to these customers. In fact, we have a lot of data, from the US market. But interestingly, even in India, I also invest in companies. I keep track of companies that focus a lot on user experience. Now, I'll give you an example of this. Now, Asian Paints, right? It's one of the top paint manufacturing firms. You would think, what has that got to do with user experience? They have actually invested a lot in terms of user experience. In fact, there are other companies that are better than them in terms of their product. Asian Paints has a premium pricing in terms of their products also, but it's because of the user experience that they give their customers, not only customers, but even their vendors. Yeah. They have implemented like digital systems, where even vendors, apart from customers, also even vendors can interact and manage their inventory. Yeah, and the stock price of that over the years, it has given like 20% CAGR returns. Shows that the more you invest in user experience, the more return on investment you get, not only for your organization but also your shareholders. This started this entire field is not new. It started in the early 1940s when commercial planes started getting manufactured. You know, Flying, like now, even then it was even more complicated. Yeah, flying is even now with all the advances in technology, it's still a complicated thing. Now imagine this, in the 40s, you have multiple companies trying to, multiple companies who are, manufacturing these planes. And every time a pilot switches to a plane, he or she has to go and learn the controls, learn the cockpit and the training, undergo the training again, because there was no standardization. Companies realized that, and they called psychologists, to redesign the cockpit and the ergonomics of the flight. So what psychologists did was they understood the mental model of the pilots. Now, this is one of the core concepts of usability. You cannot design something that is usable unless you understand the mental model of the user. Now, when I say mental model, is what it means is, how do I think about a certain concept? What is the way I will do my task? Yeah. Rather than changing the mental model of the user, if we adapt our design to the mental model of the user who's using the system, our system will be much more intuitive. So they came up, with a system that they called the Sacred Six. The most important content, when I say content, it's the information that was needed. The dials, the displays were placed up front, and what they did was they had controls that were very intuitive and that fit into the mental model of the pilots. So you had a wheel, you had a wheel for the gears, for manipulating the gears, where you move the gear and the wheels automatically go up when the flight is taking off. Then they created controls like a flap, which was meant to manipulate or control the flaps on the wings. The reason was, they knew that pilots, while flying the plane, had a lot of cognitive load, had to make a lot of decisions, and they were under a lot of stress. So many things like controls which were intuitive, the user would not, in this case, the pilot would not have to force, would not have to really think through in terms of what does this control do. This was very intuitive. It fit into their mental model. I know this is a flap. This has something to do with the wing. I know when I push this wheel, the wheels will automatically go inside the plane while taking off. It will change the gears. Yeah. So this is how user experience actually started. And there are very there are many names for this field, and every 3 years we have this whole debate going on LinkedIn as to what should we call ourselves. Now we have, like, many names like applied psychologists, user experience designers, customer experience design, service design. All of them are variations of the same thing. You put the user in the center of your product. You design as per the user's mental model. You improve the flow. You understand them. You create designs that are based on cognitive and behavioral psychology, and test it with actual users before launching it in the market. Yeah. Now we've user experience design. Many people say that this is not possible, because of limitations of technology. But that's not true. That comes from a lack of understanding of the WIM model of the WIM model, or lack of understanding of cognitive psychology. Now, even green screens. Yeah, even green screens. We have actually designed systems where we've aligned everything, where we've created interface that was easy for users to understand. Yeah, interfaces have changed from green screens to augmented reality, and all these designs are based on understanding of the human physiology. Yeah. In fact, what is driving customer experience more is that users are now demanding top-notch experience, whether it's experience on consumer sites, or whether it's employee experience. Customer experience or user experience is extremely important. Yeah. So there are a lot of research, and this is just one. It says that almost 86% of buyers will pay more for a customer experience. In fact, this reminds me of an interesting conversation that I had a couple of years back with some product managers in India. And, at that time, the thought was that, we will not pay for any online service. Who pays for online services? Now cut to 5, 6 years down the line. I've seen so many users, including myself, who wouldn't mind paying for a better experience so that we save time. We don't go through interactions that irritate the hell out of us. Yeah, there are a lot of studies in terms of customer experience, why it is a priority, and all CEOs now are talking the same language. Yeah, CEOs know now you don't have to sell, that usability or user experience is very important. Unfortunately, where we lack is how do we implement that? Our understanding of implementation, user experience is at best very, very superficial for most organizations who do not have specialized resources. Yeah. Even in employee experience, and Vanita will be, showing a case study of how employee experience also, drive a good UX will drive good employee experience also. Yeah. Uh, a lot of companies pay a lot of focus on the left side, brand reputation, customer service, empathy. But unless you deal with these things, unless you execute your product or your service, and unless you have the right kind of content strategy, the right kind of structure on your site, all your brand reputation, your sales will not really work, because there's a very famous thing in the industry which is called which is like this, it's called putting lipstick on the pig. If your product is not right, all your help, your support is just not going to help it. It's just a band-aid for poor usability. Yeah. So let's go through some of the methods that are used in creating a good usable software. So it always starts with, when we talk about usability, one thing I want to clarify is that it's not only about empathy or users. Yeah. Ultimately, user experience is a key different business differentiator. And for that, in an organization, the first thing that you do from a UX perspective is to do something that we call is a stakeholder vision. Yeah. Stakeholder envisioning means that you talk to your leaders in your organization or your client's organization in different silos and come up with a unified vision that will drive the direction of your product. Yeah, one of the key roles as a user experience designer or a leader is to ensure that you get everyone on the same page. From there, we move on to understanding how real users use systems. Most of the folks, whether it's development, whether it's business, we have a very, what do you say, a biased view of how people use things. As a user, I will do this because of XYZ. That's the most common, interaction. That's the most common statement that I've heard in dealing with different product organizations. Yeah, and a lot of people make this mistake of thinking that we can think as we can think how the user thinks, and that is completely not true, because our mental model is very, very different from users who use the system, because we are in touch with technology day in and day out. Yeah, something that might be very, very simple for us could be very complicated for a lay user. You could have very brilliant people from a different field who are not tech savvy, who may not do something that we consider very simple. So it's very good to not only understand users, but also understand users in their context. Yeah, when I say in their context, so these are some photographs from research example from research that we have done to understand the context, the environment in which the user will use the system. Yeah, assuming that a user will, always sit in a sterile office with a good air conditioner with adequate lighting. That's not true. You have to understand where people will use your system. Yeah, it's not just about talking to users, but getting insights as to what is, the most important thing, what is the block or the drive that the user will have. So for example, here, yeah, uh, a research like this could actually help customers, could actually help organizations reduce their focus on call center operations towards focusing on improving their digital experience. Yeah, because no matter what you do, yeah, people are only going to use this when they exhaust all their options here. Yeah. So a good understanding of what works from a digital experience, what is it that the users will trust, and giving clear recommendations. This is the research part that we do after the stakeholder envisioning. From there, we define the kind of user personas that are using the system. So when we talk about user personas, it's all about understanding what are the values, what are the drives, could be demographics, could be their income range, could be the environment in which they work, all of these things, anything that will help the user take a decision. Unless we have a detailed understanding of what the values are of the user, who the user is, we will be designing for ourselves. Most developers, business leaders do this mistake. As a user, I would want this to happen. Again, like we discussed, your user's mental model, your user's core values would be very, very different. From there, after defining, personas, we evangelize, we socialize, these personas across organizations, so that developers, business leaders develop empathy. Instead of saying, the CEO wanted this, or the product head wants this, we can talk in terms of users. We can talk in terms of what may be good for Mandla. This is something that Mandla will not appreciate because he is not very tech savvy. So we move, from business centered designs towards user centered designs. Yeah. From there, we understand what are the scenarios in which the user will use the system. Those scenarios will help us visualize the way people will use the system. From there, we'll understand what their journey is. And this is an example from something that we've done in South Africa, where we combined 8 different systems and 35 steps. We reduced that to 8 steps by just understanding the customer journeys, understanding what are the tasks. We reduced the friction that was there, reduced the unnecessary tasks and the bottlenecks that were there in the system, and optimize the journey. Yeah. Then, in CO, we learn how to design an information architecture, which is how would you group information, how people, how do you define the structure of the information, and what is the kind of language that people use, and where would they go to find this information? Yeah, again, this is all done with scientific principles, with proven techniques that are used, like card sorting, to understand the mental model of the user. And it's not that we are just depending only on users. There are billions and billions of dollars of research that are already there. Yeah, some are as old as 100 years, some are as new as last 4 5 years. But this is all based on human physiology, where that can help us guide towards design. What I've seen, a lot of organizations talk about is that, we let us just do only design. But what they don't realize is that design without an understanding of the users, without an understanding of stakeholders, how do you apply these principles, again, will be very limited in terms of the output that you create. So all of these models will definitely be used after we have a good understanding of the user. From there, finally, we move on to the detailed screens, which is, in the form of wireframes, where you start conceptualizing, and then we move on to the actual visual designs. Yeah. And finally, we move on to evaluating systems because, like we said, we are not designing for ourselves, we are designing for users. And these are some of the different techniques that you will learn as to that can be used to evaluate a system objectively. You know, one of the biggest problems that UX designers have is that the way feedback is given is very, very subjective. You know, John, Jesslyn, I like the mock-up that you created, but can you change that red to reflect the red of my wife's wardrobe color? This is an actual comment from a stakeholder. Yeah, from a stakeholder in one of the largest product organizations that I've worked with. Yeah, so from subjective opinion like that, we move on to objective evaluations like heuristics, which are based on a set of principles. We learn the benefits and the pros and cons of using focus groups, when to use focus groups, when not to use focus groups, and then we finally learn how to conduct usability testing, which is nothing but the user performing a task without any instructions and observers, observers observing what the user is doing and getting insight from that and improving the product. So these are the steps that are covered in just making a site or a product or an app usable. Yeah. So with that, I will hand it over to Vanita, who will walk you through some case studies of how these things are implemented.
Hey,
Thanks,
thank Mr.
Masood.
Masood. Thank you very much. Vanita, you ready?
Sure.
Okay, over to
Thank you,
you that to
Masood.
share with us more on the case study.
Yeah, thank you, Masood, and thank you, X, and good morning, everyone. So just to show you how user experience is done in action, I'm going to present two case studies today. One is from the perspective of how customer experience actually benefited an organization or a bank. And the other one is how employee experience can be a key driver for improving the performance of the organization, right? I mean, resulting in tangible return on investments. So the first case study is about how we went about with driving customer experience. So this one was for a mid-sized bank with a strong operational presence in Southeast Asia. And the project started 3 years back when the bank was at crossroads. The bank was making profit. Everything was going well. They had a digital presence, but they were, debating on what next. Should we expand our operations globally? Should we introduce new products? What should be our next? What should be our futuristic outlook, right? And that's when we were brought in, and we like what Masood said, we started off with stakeholder visioning. We worked along with stakeholders to identify what their key goals were beyond just looking at a product offering or whatever. I mean, why do they say what they say? And then we started, analyzing a lot of trends. So digital capabilities were trending then, and clearly market research showed that customers were gravitating towards digital offerings, and competition and fintech players were disrupting all the existing models. Obviously, I mean, that's something that we know, and market research also showed us that that was what was happening. And the bank was facing a lot of pressure on margin compression, right, because of competition. And that's where we said, we proposed an approach and a solution where we said we will reinvent the entire customer the digital experience of the customer by taking a holistic CX design. So we said we'll not just start designing, but we will adopt some research, some design methodologies, some user research. We will go and collect user stories. We'll start understanding the users and then start designing. I mean, and we got approval for the project because we were able to convince that can actually tangibly improve the quality of what we are designing for the users. And so we did a thorough user research to uncover all the insights and gain a deeper understanding. And, it was very interesting because it was not just done by the design team, but by everyone. It was a co-creation project. We all started gathering user stories, and some very, very interesting discoveries came from that user research, right? We realized that what the bank meant as wealth products were different from what people understood as wealth. Like, say, for instance, what wealth means for you is different from what wealth means for me. And that's where the mental models that Masood touched upon comes into picture, right? Because we are all shaped by our experiences of the world. So for some, wealth meant collectibles, right? It could be comics, right? So those are some interesting things that came up. And also data revealed that senior citizens were using the apps more than the youngsters. Very interesting, right? I mean, because you would expect that it would be the other way around. So we wanted to understand what is it. I mean, so when we went and did this research, when we spoke to the customers one-on-one, when we did all these one-on-one interviews and all of that, we realized that senior citizens were using the app, yes, but they were using the app just to check their balances, because senior citizens always have this habit of checking balances, making sure everything goes on well, but they were not using the other offerings of the bank, right? So a lot of digital experience had to be built in there. So that gave us a lot of design ideas, a lot of design decisions to be made. And then we also realized that people were more skewed on to savings. They didn't understand the difference between savings and investment. So, that's something that we had to bring in. And also we realized that it was not about, older citizens or younger folks, but what drove the investment choices were more about their knowledge and their aptitude to take risks. So say, for example, somebody who is, 50 plus was willing to take the risk if that person had adequate knowledge about the investment options, versus somebody who was a 25-year-old was very reluctant to take risk because they were not armed with the knowledge. So that, so that became a design decision. We started to design customer journeys, right? I mean, rather than selling wealth products, we started to say, okay, if the person has some knowledge, this is the journey that we would build. So we started designing based on a solid understanding of our users, what their expectations are, what their mental models are, how they interpret wealth, what does wealth actually mean to them. And when we did this, we started seeing success metrics, right? That our NPS rating, went up. I mean, from 4 to 2. The app rating, was really good. I mean, from 2.5 to 3.8, and this was all in, within 1 year, 1.5 years, right? And digitally active customers went up by 40% in just like 18 months, and digital revenue was up by 400% in 18 months. And then from user experience, had an institutionalized CX practice, which which we started putting together for all the other projects as well. And the ROI, went up by 260%. So this is basically what user research can do to design, right? I mean, one is designing without knowledge, which is what everybody does, right? I mean, today we have an idea, we just start building on the idea because we are so excited by the idea and the proposition that it can bring in. But the point that I'm trying to make through this case study is that research can actually be doing user research and following the entire methodologies can actually help us design a better customer experience. And now moving on to the next case study, and if I could please, yeah. So this is about employee experience. So we usually think of customer experience from the perspective of customers, and we always look at enhancing the experience of the app or of the digital experience. Now here I want to present a case study of how employee experience can be a key driver to customer experience. And so this this is for a large bank with a strong global presence. And not, I mean, I'm under NDA, so I'm not able to reveal the name of the bank and all of that. But basically, we had, the challenge was that we had to up the sales performance, because obviously competition was there and margin compression was happening due to competition. And so the mandate was to, to definitely increase the sales revenue. And when at the outset, when we were presented with all the data, because, usually user research and other things takes a lot of buy-in and all of that. So we start off with what we have as existing data. When we started, we realized that there were a lot of errors that were happening due to manual processes, and the sales representatives and everybody, they were all very, very good, very sharp people, but somehow it was not, resulting in sales. So again, we said we were going, and since it was internal, it was a lot more easier. So we said we are going to do a thorough study. And here the approach that we took was not user stories, but we started, gaining an understanding of what Masood said, right? About how you go through an environmental profiling or user profiling or task profiling. That uncovered, because just understanding their environment, what are the different processes that they go through during the day, just looking at it, just spending some time in their environment, understanding what a typical day looks like for them, unearths a lot of gems that we usually miss out on. So the immediate, when the problem came up to us, and when we said we wanted to improve the sales numbers, immediately it was like, okay, get more sales folks, put them, create many distribution channels. But no, I mean, all that will happen, but we'll do it strategically. Let's first understand what goes behind the scenes, why we have so many existing people, and we have all these processes. Let's study the processes. And that was the approach that we took for this. And we realized that it was, the sales folks were spending a lot of time basically on compliance related activities. They had to, they didn't have the information handy. So which means that when they were talking to a customer, they were actually going and sourcing, information from different places, because there was no single source of truth. They were looking for information from multiple sources, which took away the engagement. Now, when we are talking to somebody, when we are talking to customers, imagine if we had everything, available, all that we need available, at that point to speak to the customers. Your attention is there, rather than, trying to make them wait, looking for other things from behind the scenes, getting that information, and then going back and then filing in all the processes. So this actually, what happened was this turnaround time, which was really, I mean, it was not practical at all. It was like 2 days and 3 days, and that, resulted in the customers not signing up and a lot of issues. So we implemented a sales workflow management, for an enhanced experience, armed with our understanding of how, how the sales folks actually behave in the field and how they talk to customers. We realized, and we were able to bring in 150% growth in the sales pipeline. They were more motivated. Their experience was so good that they were able to translate that into the customer, engagement. We had higher conversion rates. We had substantial reduction in manual errors, which means that their confidence went up that much more. We had reduced customer acquisition costs, ability to track the duration of the calls. So basically, this was a very small but a very interesting feature, right? And this we were able to do only because of our understanding of how people worked on the field. So basically, a lot of time was spent on, okay, I have this discussion with you, I'm noting it down, but I don't know, I speak to 100 customers every day, but I don't know which customers to actually track and follow up, right? So there are 10 customers out of these 100 customers who are expressing interest, right? So just by identifying, or by creating that feature in our design to track those 10 customers, so they started engaging with those customers more, which means that, we were able to do a lot of conversion. So these are the two case studies where, taking a holistic approach to customer experience and not just the design of it has helped the organizations substantially. And with this, I'd like to pass it on to Masood to take it on from here.
Thanks, Vanita. Okay. Cool. So, like Vanita mentioned, right, there's a lot of stuff that you do in terms of, creating a product that is usable, that is persuasive. You have to understand the science behind it. You have to understand how do you do research? How do you, get insights from customers? It's not just about, talking to customers or asking them what they want. It's about understanding of emotions. It's understanding principles. It's understanding how to objectively, design, objectively design screens based on certain principles. Yeah. So a lot of these principle skills are required to create something usable. Like we said, right? One is the usability aspect, and second is the advanced user experience aspect, which is all about persuading people. Now, this persuading people, the emotions, understanding the emotions part is something that, is a lot of people, when I talk to people and business leaders, they say that, how can you measure something as abstract as an emotion? Yeah. Now that's where I say that's where the science comes in. There are different methods, there are different techniques that you use to understand users at an in-depth level. So all these principles of creating the right kind of questions, creating the right kind of probes, understanding different emotions, the real emotions, using something called a laddering technique. These are the things that are taught in the courses that we teach. Yeah. So for example, let's see some examples here of what we do in our courses. So we start with, like I said, our course, our field, user experience and usability, is based on the foundation of human physiology. So in the first course, which is a 2-day course, we understand the different, we understand the different loads that people have. We understand how we see, we understand how we think, how we retain information, and how we take decisions. Yeah, we understand limitations of motor, and we see experiments. This is, what we learned in the first course, which is the foundations of user experience. From there, we do a very systematic understanding of user-centered design, or a systematic user-centered analysis. How do you do that? And all these courses, these are based on the projects that we do. So HFI is like a consulting company that also does training. The reason why we got into training was we found that there are very few, the demand is a lot, but there are very few skilled professionals who actually know how to do this stuff. So that's one of the reasons why we went into training. And everything that you saw in Vanita's case study, right? Creating a design strategy, creating profiles, doing field studies, doing, understanding different ways of capturing data, from there creating an information architecture, is then taught in the 3-day course, which is user-centered analysis and design. From there, after doing all of these activities, that is when we actually start with the design, which starts with the navigation model, presentation, content, and interaction. These are all frameworks that we've developed so that people of different levels of experience also can do the same level of design. So for example, now if you're following design, if you're creating a design which follows the NPCI framework, we know that you have systematically designed something based on best practices. And then finally, in the last course, you learn how do you test your interface with users. They say the proof of the pudding is in the eating. There's some metaphor, I forgot what exactly is that. But how do your users actually use the system? It's not about them telling them what they want, but whether they are able to complete a task or not. And there are again systematic methods that we use to conduct these tests. There are different kinds of tests that you do, which could be a small scale qualitative test. It could be a large scale online remote program that that you can conduct. And how do you facilitate, how do you moderate a test without unnerving the participant, without making the participant nervous, and how do you get a complete stranger to tell you the things that they need, and how do you infer insight from that that will help drive your design decision. So this course is like an intense 10-day course with 8 hours each, plus you get us plus there are it's a combination of theory, it's a combination of theory, science, and practical hands-on examples that you do throughout the course. Yeah. We also customize training for certain organizations. Like recently I've conducted customized trainings for UOB and Kotak Bank, where we ask students to articulate what are the problems that they face in their organization. I saw one question from in the Q&A session, that how do we convince our stakeholders about how do you about the need for time to implement a complete user-centered design processes. So then, based on the problems that organizations face, then we come up with solutions that will help them overcome all these issues. So what are the typical challenges that you faced? One user in the Q&A session actually asked this question, right? How do we convince business stakeholders about the time that is required to create a solution? And that is a challenge that is always there. And there are systematic methods, frameworks that help designers implement this in organizations. Yeah. So with that, I will hand it over to Ing Seng for the Q&A. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you again for Mr. Masud as well as Ms. Vanita. So yes, it is a very fruitful session that you share a lot information regarding user experience. Now, of course, due to time constraint, you're only given 50 minutes to share your experience. So that's why that if let's say for the rest, if let's say you have any others information you require to know more, right, just give it a call. Just contact us, either send email to us or call us, then definitely we are more than happy to cater to you. So now we will go for Q&A sessions. So where I will I already compiled a few questions from the audience, and I will share to the speaker right now. Okay, the first question from the audience is, hey, hi, we know UX is important, but however, due to the time restriction, our team may not have sufficient time to spend in UX. What should we do? Because business requests always need to launch the application soon as possible, where e-courses have no time to run any UX related testing.
Right. So this is a very common problem that most of our students and even like most UX designers face, in organizations. And what we say is that you gradually, you introduce this whole user-centered design methodology with baby steps. So like what you've learned right now in the COA is about user-centered analysis, stakeholder interviews, and then design, and then UT. It may not be possible to convince your stakeholders to directly implement everything. What we generally suggest is call important stakeholders and do something like a usability testing session with real customers. Yeah, call business stakeholders to observe them and see and ask them to observe upfront how customers will are struggling through their while using their application. In fact, this is what I did a couple of years back, just before COVID. I had called the CTO of one of the largest insurance companies worldwide, and we had a usability test in our office in HFI. We had a one-way mirror where me and the stakeholder, we were observing what was going on. There's a TV screen on which we were observing the interactions. The poor user was given a task of buying insurance online, through their prototype. Yeah. When the user clicked on the date picker, yeah, there was an option to select the year, but that was not clear at all. There was just a drop down. There was a link on top which was not very evident, and the user had to click 47 times to select her birth date for the insurance proposal. Yeah, seeing the user struggle, yeah, made the the CTO was furious, seeing that my developers tell me, my designers tell me that everything is right with our prototype, but look at how customers are struggling with our interface. And from that day onwards, I did not need to convince him to start implementing these processes. We gradually implement these processes over the next 6 months, and then it became integrated within the process. So start with baby steps, involve key stakeholders, get them to back you. These are the 3 basic minimum steps that I would suggest. Yeah,
I see.
I hope
Thank you
that
very
answers
much.
your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your answer. Okay, so from the floor, actually, there's another question is related to testing. So the question is application testing process covered in UX? And what is the framework being used during testing our applications?
Okay,
So this is the
so
question from the floor.
yeah, the application testing is not covered in UX. We have a different kind of evaluation that's generally done by the QA department. We have a different kind of testing, like which is called heuristic evaluation, where we systematically go through the interface, and based on our understanding of the principles, we come and give observations and give recommendations as to how to improve. But what you are talking about, application testing, that's a very different process. Yeah, that's part of QA.
Okay, noted. Okay, due to time constraint, actually we already overshot 11 a.m. So I will pick one more from the floor
Okay.
to ask the speaker. The 4 program that just now you shared during the sharings, is the training run follow sequence? Example, should I attend foundation first before I go to the other one? Or I can just attend direct to the one that is required from my business need?
Okay, so we strongly suggest that this training should be run in a sequence, because what happens is, the way we have structured the courses, you start with an understanding of the human physiology. Without that understanding, you will not be able to apply the principles, understand how to do research better. From there, you do the information architecture and the design, and then do testing. There's a reason why these courses are structured, though we have many people who just go in for design or research, but ultimately they come back and realize that this is not the way to do things, because the courses are structured in a way, the way we actually implement our projects. So it's better to follow the same sequence that is there, like foundations, then UCA, then design, and then UT.
I see. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Masuk. I think that's all for Q&A session. For the rest questions that we are not able to cater, no worry. Each of you will receive an email from us after today's event, and we will compile all the questions as well as answer to you. And definitely, you can always raise another question to us so that we can post it to Mr. Masuk or Miss Wanita. Then you will get our reply as soon as possible. Okay, so just to recap again on the program, because in the floor, actually, there's a lot of questions related to our training schedule. So this is the coming schedule for our 4 program. User experience is a foundation is the first one, where it will have on the 22nd, 23rd November, followed by UCA. The next one in December, which is the design and the art of effectiveness, web and application design. Last but not least, practical usability testing. So these are the coming program that we're going to have at InfoTrack. And for those that attended for today's workshop, they are entitled for additional 5% discount from this particular 4 trainings. Okay, so guys, thank you very much for your time for today. I hope you all have a fruitful session from us. And again, thanks again to our speaker today, Mr. Masuk, as well as Miss Wanita. Till our next workshop, we will see you again. Thank you, guys. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Yeah.